Hey, welcome back to the Biblical Preaching Podcast, and we're thinking about 5 aspects of natural delivery. When we talk about delivery, I think we're living in an age now where maybe the preeminent value for listeners is that the speaker should feel natural. Now, a couple of generations ago, I think people would be impressed by the performative aspects of a speaker. You know, he had a voice for radio, or the gestures were very impressive, that sort of thing. I don't think people like that anymore. People don't really want to be listening to something that feels fake. When you're trying to buy a car and the salesman is a bit too slick and like he's got all the wording down perfectly, and you just feel like you're getting a rehearsed performance. It doesn't really create confidence. When you're on the phone with someone and you can tell they're reading from a script, it just does not feel natural. And so how do we get a natural delivery style? When I'm teaching preaching and I think about the issues of delivery, especially, I say, my greatest goal is not for you to become a preacher that preaches like somebody else. My goal is for you to be yourself and to be able to communicate as you. However, to communicate effectively as yourself isn't very natural. It's fine in a corridor having a conversation with friends, but when you're in front of a crowd in that very unnatural setting of a preaching situation, everything freezes, everything kind of limits and restricts, and suddenly it feels anything but natural. And so here's 5 aspects of natural delivery, 5 things that we need to be thinking about. Number 1, a natural feeling eye contact feels anything but natural. Okay, so if I'm preaching and I'm making eye contact with people and there's a crowd of people staring at me, that doesn't feel natural to me. But for it to come across as natural, I need to overcome my awkwardness. It's much easier for me to kind of keep my eyes down in my notes, even though I know exactly what I'm saying. I can look at my notes and it feels like a safety zone for the eyes. Or maybe get into a habit of looking above people, or only looking at certain parts of the room. Actually, it takes some work, which is kind of the point, but it takes some work to become natural at moving around and making meaningful eye contact with your listeners. Just 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 seconds, not forever. You don't stare, but equally not fleeting and moving all the time. Just make meaningful eye contact, even if they're not looking. I make meaningful eye contact with the tops of people's heads. Sometimes they're looking at their Bibles. That's fine. But after a few seconds, move on to someone else. But it takes some work to learn to do that, for it to feel natural. Okay, so that's number 1, eye contact. Number 2, natural sized gestures feel very unnatural from the perspective of the preacher. Let me kind of illustrate what I mean. If we were having a conversation, you and me, and I was describing the fact that God created the world, in a conversation between 2 people that are stood a few feet apart, I could make a gesture the size of a volleyball or a melon with my hand and refer to the world just by moving my hands like that. But if I did that on a platform in front of hundreds of people in a large auditorium, they wouldn't know what I was doing. It wouldn't make any sense at all. And the general rule is the bigger the room, the bigger the gesture. So if you've got 50 people, it needs to be bigger than if you have 5. If you have 500, it needs to be bigger than if you have 50. And if you're a little bit introverted or a little bit shy, it might feel really strange to extend your arms so far and to make big gestures. But actually, from the perspective of the listener, that looks natural. It looks right. And so we have to do work in order to be natural. That's number 2, the size of our gestures. Number 3 is similar. Natural gestures feel unnatural in terms of the direction of, how shall I put it? The direction of progression. How do we read in our culture? We read left to right, which means when we think of time, we think of time being left to right. But if I'm preaching to a crowd, my left is their right. And so if I'm going to refer to the past and I point to my left and then I point to the future to my right, people can cope. It's not like they're going to have their brains fried, but it's just that little step of having to convert it. But if I can reverse that and refer to the past by pointing to their left and the future pointing to their right, it just feels completely natural to them. That's something I have to learn, right? I need to work in order to come across naturally. In the size of my gestures, that was number 2. In the direction of travel of my gestures, that's number 3. And then number 4, natural explanation. If we were having a conversation, you and me, and I needed to explain how to get somewhere or how to do something, I might be able to just fire it off. Do this, then do this, then do this, and that might be enough. But there's something about a crowd. When you've got a crowd of people, it takes a little bit more work to explain so that people can catch what you mean. If you're explaining something biblically or theologically, or if you're illustrating and you're painting a picture with words, it just takes a little bit more than it might in a conversation. And you might think, oh, I'm going too long. This feels unnatural. No, maybe not. Maybe from their perspective, you're getting it just right. Now, it is possible to go too long and to over deliberate and almost kind of frustrate people because you don't get to the point that they can see you're getting to. But it does take a little bit of work. Instead of just the natural, perhaps brief or quick fire reference that we might make, when we're speaking with a crowd, sometimes we need to expand it a little bit, develop it a little bit, just give it time for the image that we're describing to form on the screens that are inside their minds, right? So whether it's an illustration or telling a story or explaining, giving instruction, anything like that, with a larger crowd, it sometimes takes a little bit more instruction, a little bit more detail, perhaps a little bit more pause. It feels unnatural to me, but from the perspective of the listeners, it sounds just right. And so I've got to work on that and maybe check in with listeners to make sure that that's working, that I didn't lose you. Did I leave you behind, or did you get frustrated that I wasn't getting it out? Like, what's the perception among the listeners? That's number 4. Okay, so natural explanation can feel unnatural. And then lastly, number 5, which is kind of the catch-all for what we're saying here, natural delivery takes unnatural attention. I can have a conversation with a friend about football or something that we care about without giving it any thought at all. But talking about the Bible in front of a group of people, and the group potentially larger than just a handful, but even that, it takes some thought. How can I deliver this in a way that is going to seem and be natural, because it's the real me that's coming through? And so, kind of like we've said in another bite-sized video, if you're going to improve your delivery, you improve it one thing at a time. Well, if you're going to make your delivery natural, it takes some effort, it takes some focus and some work, and that may feel unnatural, but actually the fruit of that is so worth it. To not do that means to continue to communicate, perhaps in ways that don't work, that don't quite come across as you intend. And you can claim, well, it's just me. Fine, but it doesn't seem natural to them. And so do the work necessary to come across naturally in your communication. It's worth it, because after all, we are preaching God's word and we want people to know this is genuine, this is real, this is honest, this isn't a performance, this isn't something that someone is just talking about, but this is a reality in their lives. And so the natural style of communication, I think, is going to help that dynamic in our preaching. Just as we finish, before you move on, I want you to notice something. 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, that this isn't really talking about delivery and preaching, but it does kind of relate. It's a description that Paul gives of his ministry to the Thessalonians. It's a fascinating passage, and I just want to dip in a couple of places. In verse 7 of 1 Thessalonians 2, Paul says, "We were gentle among you, like a nursing mother taking care of her own children." And then just a few verses later, in verse 11, he says, "For you know how, like a father with his children, we exhorted each one of you and encouraged you and charged you to walk in a manner worthy of God." like a mother, like a father. That's the heart of the minister, right? That's the heart of Paul the apostle as he was preaching and ministering to the Thessalonians. He wasn't trying to perform. He wasn't trying to put on a show. His heart was the heart of a mother caring for her children. His heart was like the heart of a father, passionately exhorting and encouraging the children. That's something we can pray about, isn't it? That as we preach, that it wouldn't be our delivery that is the focus or our delivery that leaves a mark, but if there's anything of us in it, that it would be our heart of love, that it would be our desire for the people that we're speaking to be gripped by the reality of the gospel that we're speaking to them. And so, thanks for joining us. That's 5 aspects of natural delivery. We'll come back again sometime and talk more about specifics, but think about those 5 because it's worth the effort. It's worth the work, and it may feel unnatural, but it's worth what it takes to become increasingly natural in the way that we deliver. Thanks for joining us. We'll be with you again soon.
Thanks for joining us today. We really appreciate every positive review, like, share, and comment. And thank you for praying for us. We hope you will join us again next time on the Biblical Preaching Podcast.